Hey there, welcome to the channel. If you are new, please do subscribe, hit the bell button, like and comment. Obviously this is going out on premium first before everyone gets to the meaty bits, but we need to talk about what's happened this morning. We've had a bit of a dump, a bit of a crash, so to speak, but I do think that this is just a natural correction in my opinion. We'll talk a little bit about it in terms of what could happen overall in the next few days essentially, but as you can see very quickly we have got news articles of crash, destruction, it's over, Bitcoin's died, all kinds of lovely stuff. Just do not panic. We've had a monumental rise in the last, let's just say from the start of November, okay, all the way up to now. We've had a monumental run. We've not realistically had a big correction, and to some people this is brand new, to some people this is quite normal. So, you know, the word on the street, and you've probably heard it before, is just buy the dip. We're still in a bullish market. We're still in a very interesting space with institutional investments buying. We've seen a lot of people holding. We've seen a lot of exchanges losing the amount of circulating supply in and around their exchanges. So that's still bullish in my opinion. So one thing that is news that we do need to cover is essentially what came out the other day regarding HSBC. Not the greatest bank in the world, I'll be honest with you, but it has been noticed in and around the financial sector that they have been stopping financial transactions relating to crypto. So be careful. I've personally, in my 5 years, pretty much 4 years in and around buying stocks, shares, crypto, never had a transaction bounce for doing anything. I've had a few where it asked me for validation or verification that it is me, which is fair enough due to the sums and whatnot. But I've never had anything to go by of a complete and utter stop. I have heard horror stories where people have been doing really bad stuff in terms of certain exchanges and certain stuff back in like 2017, 2018. That's different. A lot's changed since then. But this is kind of interesting that this has happened now. I don't know whether it's a glitch in the system. I don't know if it's anything other than just them just being a bit of a dickhead. But for me, you know, financial security should always be key. Do not rely solely on one bank account. Do not rely solely on one crypto as an example as well. Always make sure that if you are using crypto, try and have something where you've got multiple payment mechanisms. So I have 2 bank accounts, for example, in case something goes totally wrong. It's just one of those things. I always have had 2 bank accounts, thinking about it, even before crypto. Don't know why, I just kind of been brought up in that way. But for me, it is kind of interesting that that has happened. But anywho, shall we go on to some charts? So moving on to the dominant chart, yes, there's been a monster glitch. I can see this. It's going to be annoying me. I'm hoping it gets rubbed off. But we've gone to a naked chart. I want to look at this from a new perspective. The reason being, I still feel that this body closure is important. Yes, I've had a bit of a wick penetrating through to potentially be another high, but it's a wick and it only glitched it for a couple of hours, even probably less than that. It was a real random spike. But what we're going to look at is that wick here to essentially this bottom area, and this is what the other setup was. And I do feel, and I believe overall, that we are potentially going to turn around, in my opinion. I think, you know, when I look overall, I think this level here, where this is penetrated, is probably the top as it stands right now. Okay, what tends to happen when we have a Bitcoin dip is Satoshi values, as you can see here, survive a bit more. The USD prices have absolutely plummeted, but when you look to the left of the destruction of everything, you know, on a candle, where USD price have just died, on that BTC side, it's not too bad. As you can see, VeChain, it hasn't lost anything yet. I think the likes of Zilliqa, for example, 5% versus 18%. RSR, 0.88%, 17%, as you can see, right? People are programmed to look at the USD prices and the panic, whereas realistically, we may well get the bounce of the alt season kicking off very soon. So, what we're seeing here already, weekly timeframes, we've got a number of levels to keep an eye on. I want to make it very clear that some of these levels are very important to keep an eye on. I think this level is important. I also believe that potentially we could be looking at all kinds of different levels as well, especially 52 is probably very important, as you can see from March time 2019. I know it's a long time ago, but they do become somewhat important overall as things progress in time with the market. Now with this, I want to do another version of a fib because I've added my other extensions on here. You can probably see one up here. As you can see, they go up higher as well on the other side. So when we look at this, this is essentially, you know, oh hello, see that little spike there? That was crazy. When you look at this overall, what the plan is, I believe this is a top, and I think we're going to retrace, and this is going to be some of the elements of an extension to look at. This is more of a swing sort of setup, but we want to look elsewhere as well. Regarding this, in my opinion, we're going to do a full retracement of this low to this high, and what we're already seeing here is confluence between these extensions as well. So they're very, very similar. That's what I wanted. They're very, very similar. So there's confluence there between those two levels. So with that in mind, we've got another one as well in the middle there, which is a 50. When you put your cursor on the 50, we've got perfect symmetry with, as you can see, a lot of areas of wickage back in 2017 and 2018. So that is very, in my opinion, very much important. So with that in mind, I just want to put that there. I want to level this up to know that we are on some sort of right track with those extensions for potentially going to those low levels. So just to kind of explain the reason why, when you look at the other side of this game and you look at where these go, the smaller extensions are always good for trading. They're always good to find some perfect little profit areas from the impulses. It's a minus, you know, it's like removing that one area. It's still a Fibonacci number, it's good. But when you look overall at the other side of it, the bigger extensions, that would indicate where the bounce is going to go. And as you can see here, look at the confluence. And this is one thing I want to show you as well, which I noticed before. Look at how this did a perfect kind of like level. So what we've got here, this is a crazy element of this game. When you think overall how it kind of maps out, where we've got this massive dump, it pops up and it flies up, and then for some reason it carries on going all the way up and hits that level already on its nose. When you start moving and manipulating this round to see where things bounce and where things go, again, look at that. So what have we got here? We have got this high, this low. Where can we retrace up to? Well, we've retraced up to here. We've pulled back. We carried on going. We went up. We spiked up to one of the extension levels where we could go. So they always have some sort of confluence. This is why I believe that this could be maybe the top, maybe the end of the move. So they're always going to be, always going to be good in my opinion. So we need to keep an eye on certain things. So a level here is obviously going to be an interest because it's obviously the bottom. And in my opinion as well, you could probably look at where these levels have been in and around where this dominance chart has been. People look at this now as sentiment value. They start to kind of trade off this to understand where the market is going as well. Do I buy altcoins? Do I hold my Bitcoin? Do I do this, that, and the other? So in my opinion, not financial advice, but I do feel that this could be the top. It's got confluence between, ultimately, in my opinion, some, Fibonacci levels, which is always good, and extension levels as well. It's obviously got past data from the past, but the most important thing, it's just the way that it's reacted from that. So we need to be careful. But for me, when you look at the daily time frame, we're starting to see where people are starting to formulate a bit of an opinion here. My opinion is, I think that this is popped, it retraces 618, and we're going down to these lower levels again. Again, these lower extensions wouldn't shock me in the slightest if we went down to 63, and then from there on we'll probably pull up again and go down again, continue the downtrend. But one thing I will say as well, them extensions make life a lot easier overall. If we're looking at this lower time frame sort of situation here, this has been the monster move. It's been a monster move, and this dominance chart does and is starting to correct now, in my opinion. But let's just wait and see what happens overall. The market is very, very Tetris at the moment. But for me, definitely those extension levels have some sort of meaning. They have a level of past structure. They have a level of certainty on the Fibonacci, which is always important. So keep an eye on 52, 50 and 46 potentially. If that goes down there aggressively over a period of weeks, everything's going to go parabolic. If it trickles down there, it's going to be a nice little alt season. But at the same time though, we've always got to keep an eye on it as well, the fact that 57 was a key level in the past as well where it turned around, so it may not just fall. But what I will say is this as well, these body closures are significant in my opinion. I always look at body closures more than anything. I look at wicks for data, but when you think of the trend, where's the absolute? Always, in my opinion, body closures are absolute for me. That's my personal preference. So if you're looking at this and you're thinking, well, actually, can it form a low? We need to break 57 before we get really excited. So if we get down to 57, it's like, oh, awesome. And we break that and then we go down to 52. That is when everything, I think, will get very, very exciting and pretty parabolic, in my opinion. Moving on, though, shall we talk about Bitcoin for a bit? Because we've done an all-time high. We've started to pull back. This is what we've got, right? We're starting to finally get it. So I could be confident now in the fact that this has printed and this is the next weekly candle. And all we need to do from this low, from March, we could do a number of things. We could do a retracement, which could argue is, well, could we go to $27,000? Well, maybe. And that would be a 38% retracement, essentially. So that is one level where we could all be looking at. Another level as well that I would be interested in looking at if I go to the daily time frame is actually where the year opened. The year actually opened on roughly that level as well, give or take in and around this region, which is absolutely mental, really. So that level as well, and we've also had a tap just above it on those EMAs. So I think the confluence of that level, in my opinion, is somewhat significant. So that is certainly one to go, well, actually, let's keep an absolute eye on that, because we've had an EMA retest, we've had past level EMA retest, and that is obviously where the EMA is. If we do, we may catch up with the other EMA into that region anyways. For me personally, will we go and retest 20k? Well, maybe, but that is a huge move if that does happen. So for me, I'm not going to get too excited regarding a very, very big monster dip, because I think people will cry. But for me, looking at the technical side of it, I think as a Fibonacci level, if we're going from low to high, that is it. That is a monster move, and that's the only significant obvious. We can't really go from there because it's not really obvious, in my opinion, not obvious enough. That is just a tiniest little dip. I didn't even think that was a dip, in all honesty. It was tiny. It was like from 12k down to like 9 or even 10k at the time. It was tiny. So I wouldn't class that as a significant move. I'd class it from this point here, from March. But realistically, you could look at this level and see where this one would add up. In my opinion, there's not much difference at all. 29,000 potentially from that level, with a little bit of a move, not much. But we'll go from the obvious just to see where things go. But that has significance because of the EMA. That has significance because it has tapped it before on the previous week. So yeah, that is somewhat interesting. One thing to keep an eye on. For me though, I think any market needs a retracement. Whether we trickle down to that point, whether we dump down to that point or whatever. We're already at 34,000, right? We've already done half the damage. We were at 41,000, nearly 42,000. We've already took off a lot. So people are like, oh my God, that's like a massive, but realistically, we're already halfway there. We're probably more than halfway there, let's be honest. So just be careful. Another one to look at as well is obviously Ethereum. Again, I did TA on this yesterday. I was saying that we are going to potentially go to these levels. And I was like, well, just be careful because this hasn't printed a close yet, and we have now. So essentially what the levels were on this was simple. This is where I think it's going to happen now. So when we look at this, overall, in my opinion, we've got those extension levels up there. These extension levels are from doing it reverse engineered. But when you look at the confluence between these other Fibonacci's, if we go and do this essentially, so this is what would happen if this happens. So say if we go down to 873 and we pull back, potentially what we're looking at is either we've got these extensions here or the other extensions where it could go up to these levels from the other side, and I'll show you what I mean in a second. So when you think logically, I feel, in my opinion, that we will at some point maybe test this level here. Okay, so this is like the obvious kind of level, the point. It's been resistance, it's been support in the past as well, briefly I say support for a little tiny bit. We've also had a wick on it before, recently. So significant area, one to keep an eye on in my opinion, but we'll see where we go. So that's like the big obvious one in my opinion. But when you look overall at the all-time high, to the low, the extensions are as follows up here. So they're the extensions for that. So in my opinion, it's going to be very, very interesting. But one thing that's a big confluence as well is look at where the 618 is on this for as resistance in the past. So this has been obviously all the way up, but it shot right through the 618. That is now obviously flipped to support. So that will be a support level. So that is very, very close to where that 382 is on the previous, on the retracement level. So that is a really, really good confluence. So in and around that $900 level, in and around that region is going to be very, very important in my opinion. So certainly worth looking at in my opinion. And again, if you look at where this one is as well, that's roughly where the 618 is. Let me just overlap it so you can see it. That is pretty damn, there you go. Always use confluence of 2 different Fibonacci's in my opinion to help you gauge the market. And when you actually look and put this a bit further forward, actually, if you just put that in around that and make it a zone essentially, it's perfect symmetry in line with that. So that's probably a better angle. So for me, $900 retest, it probably will be a very, very good buy opportunity for me, in my opinion, for a long, to potentially send it up to these extensions beyond all-time high. So beyond all-time high, yes, we're in price discovery mode, but in terms of profit taking, we may well find people take profits at those sort of levels potentially, but it also may do crypto things and carry on flying through. But the biggest question that I often get, especially in premium, is when do you take profits? Well, if you're in price discovery mode, it's basically up to you. You've got Fibonacci as one of the main indicators that you can use as an extension. They're the obvious extensions you can use. You can add more extensions, by the way, in the settings. You get them in default anyway, so you always get all these random extensions. They're all just the same. They're all the same numbers. They're just programmed to have a different number at the front, so it doubles it essentially. So it gets quite interesting. So for me, I stand by my Twitter analysis essentially by saying that this would pull back. It has pulled back, and I still feel that these extensions are very much possible in my opinion. But again, this market is so mental, it's so crazy. Just be careful with it in my opinion, and don't worry too much about the dollar values. Worry more about what the Satoshis are doing for taking profit as well. Like I say, I always feel that this is undervalued, especially the side of the Bitcoin element. Look at the Bitcoin chart. In my opinion, we're looking quite good. As I can zoom in on this one on the weekly, what we've had here, we've had an obvious pullback. We're pulling back into this nice little zone here, the 38%, pretty much 38% retracement pullback. And when you look overall, we've got all this kind of situation where, yeah, we've got cool stuff happening here. We've got resistance levels. We've got obviously, potential areas where we can look at. We've got areas here of taking profit, but we've also got extensions all the way up here as well. So we've got loads of data here. Obviously, it looks a bit messy, but for me, fundamental-wise, you can look at so many different situations. If I remove that, make it a bit easier for you. We got this 618 level, cool, but you've got these extensions up here. This, in my opinion, these extensions are probably going to be very, very important. If I just make that a different color, 618 levels, and then in my opinion, I'd probably just go with this realistically because the confluence isn't that far away for me, in my opinion. The confluence is pretty good. So you got this whole level, and obviously, if you're looking at this situation here where we've got this region, you've got this genuine sort of 618 level. You've also got this one here, just not too far behind it. So maybe you can probably just do this as well, just give that a bit more clarity. So yeah, when you start actually removing the fibs, what have you got here? You've actually got quite a decent little bit of structure where you can go, right, we've got resistance here, cool. We've got support, this will be support, and then you've got these levels of resistance and probably potential areas of price discovery. Not so much price discovery because it's been there in the past, but it's been a long, long time. We're talking, what, Christ, we're talking about the dump of 2018 sort of levels here, that we've not been there for a while. But when you look at zoom out, it's still forming some sort of decent, it's technically, you still got somewhat a trend essentially, just about. So there's all kinds of different matters with this, but that, in my opinion, Ethereum looks and still feels undervalued in BTC value. Bear in mind that this was more expensive when alt season was around not too long ago.